afternoon, and I want to thank you for joining the Superior Health Quality Alliance Roundtable conversation around the COVID-19 vaccine and motivational interviewing part 2, which will be presented by Mia Croyle. My name is Jerry Henniker, and I'm joined by my colleagues today, Kelsey Ostergren and Kim Heft. For those of you who have been joining these meetings over the past few weeks, welcome back. We love having you. And for those of you who are new to the call, we're glad that you're here to share this information with us. We host these sessions each week. They're 30-minute educational sessions where we highlight important topics related to COVID-19 vaccinations and boosters. We hope that you're able to join us each week. One thing that we do ask you to think about each week as you listen to our presentations is, are there any pebbles in your shoes or things that you're struggling with or things that you're trying to figure out? These are the things we want to know about. And if you have something, please put it via direct message in the Zoom chat. This might be a topic for one of our future sessions. We also will be having a survey that we would like you to complete. We'll put that link in the chat at the end of the session. The survey takes just a few minutes to complete. We want to know if the information we're presenting is helpful, and if it isn't helpful, we want to know that too. Kim is also going to put the link for the PowerPoint presentation in the chat. We'd also like you to use chat today for any of your comments or questions or anything else that pops into your mind as you're listening to our session today. And then if we have time remaining at the end of our session, we can use those as discussion questions. Now I'd like to turn it over to Kelsey, and she's going to share a few updates with us.
Thank you, Jerry, and welcome everyone. Jerry, if you want to flip to the next slide, I just want to give a quick update on schedules and programming. So to better serve all of our participants, those that have been joining these calls and those of you who may have been also joining our Tuesday office hour calls. So we know having two separate calls might be challenging for busy schedules. And so we want to be cognizant of that. So starting next week, Wednesday, the 13th of April, we're going to be combining what was previously two separate calls. So a 30-minute call on Tuesday, which was our office hours call, and then this 30-minute call on Wednesdays into one singular event. It will still be at the same time, noon Central, 1 p.m. Eastern on Wednesdays. But again, now it will just be merged into one larger event. So the first half will be this same format. It'll be education, the same leadership COVID-19 roundtable that you've been joining week after week. And then the second half hour will transition into more of what was previously our office hours. And this is just an open Q&A time that we will just allow for folks on the line to just talk and bring forward any questions that you might have. So all of that said, you will be receiving more information tomorrow. There will be an email coming out that will include an updated calendar appointment for this combined 1 hour event. As always, we would love it if you could join for the full hour. We want the Q&A session to really build on the educational content that's presented in the first half. And again, really looking for your feedback. We want this to be meaningful, so let us know how it works for you. If you liked the two separate calls, if you like the one call, but we also recognize we've been running out of time on this call to do Q&A. So that was part of the rationale behind it as well. So more information to come, but just wanted to give a heads up that that is our plan starting next week, that this call will turn into a 1 hour session and you will get updated information coming to your inbox tomorrow morning. So the next slide, again, I just wanted to kind of put a plug for this. We are looking for resident stories about why they received their COVID-19 vaccines or boosters. So if you have residents in your facility who you think would be a good fit and would be willing to provide a short testimony, please let us know. We really would love to be able to highlight your residents in your facility as we work to disseminate some of these stories across our region. Feel free to send me a chat through Zoom or Tony Kettner. Her email's listed here on the slide. She's really leading this initiative for our team at Superior Health. So if you have any questions or have any ideas, reach out to her. And then the only other thing I'd add that's not on this slide is that our deadline for this is 3 weeks from today. It's April 28th. So again, ask you to think about it, sleep on it. We'll keep reminding you, but just wanted to at least share that we do have sort of an end date for this. The last reminder I will give before I turn it over to Mia is about the CMS scenario-based training modules that are available, again, on demand at no cost to all of our nursing home staff. I know we talked some about this last week. The thing I'll say is that CMS is monitoring which nursing homes have had 75% of their staff complete this training. So we strongly encourage and recommend that you consider a mechanism to disseminate this to your staff. There's an option to do this as sort of in a group setting. So that may be an approach you consider as well, and just kind of chunking it out and having a group of folks kind of go through this. If you have questions or need help, please reach out to us. You will have these slides. So Christy Wergeen's contact information is listed there, and you can reach out to her. Again, she's kind of our point person for this project, but feel free, reach out to any of us if you have, our email addresses or a different point of contact from Superior Health. Any of us can help you, and would be more than happy to, talk you through any challenges or questions that you might have on this training. So that was a lot of housekeeping announcements, sort of breaking news stuff, other things to just kind of keep in mind as we move forward. But again, reach out to us if you have questions. Feel free to chat us through Zoom. We're here to help you and support you. We want this to be as easy as possible. So happy to help answer whatever questions we can. So with that, Mia, welcome. We are thrilled to have you back for part 2 of your motivational interviewing series, and I will turn the floor over to you.
Great. Thank you, Kelsey. And thank you all for joining on the call. The purpose of this call and the information and activities we're going to do is really to help you think about how could my approach to conversations about vaccination, whether it's COVID vaccination or other vaccinations, how could my approach be informed by motivational interviewing? Some of you may already be familiar with motivational interviewing, and for some of you, this may be your first taste of it. We do hope to get a little bit of interaction in there. So just as a heads up for those of you that need to get in the right mental space for that, we want you to stretch yourself a little bit. So just to let you know that we'll be asking you to play an active role, not a publicly active role, but to try some of these things out, at least in your own head as we move through it. So just wanted to give everybody a heads up. And obviously, it's always participation by choice. You can go ahead for the next slide. Really quickly, I'm going to go quickly through some of this introductory material because it is a repeat from part 1, but I also want to offer it as a refresher for those of you that were on part 1 and for those of you that weren't, just so we can sort of be having a little bit of a common understanding. So what is motivational interviewing? There's sort of a long technical definition on there, but really it's a communication style. And our intention is that we want to be supporting the person we're communicating with as they think about behavior changes, so doing something or not doing something, where they're currently feeling ambivalent or unsure about their next step or the way forward. It is an evidence-based approach, and motivational interviewing has a very deep wealth of research that supports this as a very effective way to have conversations that lead to behavior change. Next slide. One of the really important things is that as we move into a conversation where we're wanting to utilize motivational interviewing, we have to have the right mindset in place. So keeping in mind that the purpose of our motivational interviewing based conversation about vaccine is to increase the other person's motivation to get the vaccine, but our purpose is not to persuade them to get the vaccine. So we're not having to be necessarily in the role of twisting their arm or convincing them. We want to be helpful in their decision-making process. And it's important to keep in mind that regardless of what they ultimately decide to do, regardless of where they start in that conversation, the most effective approach involves really partnering with them, having a collaborative tone and approach, and then also meeting them with a good deal of acceptance and working. So instead of spending our efforts trying to convince them to do something, we spend our efforts in motivational interviewing working on drawing out where their sources of motivation might be. So it's just a slightly different mindset and focus. You can go to the next slide. So we're really going to hone in on one key skill in motivational interviewing, and that is reflective listening. So, excuse me, reflective listening is a statement. Sometimes it's called active listening, so you may recognize it as that, but it's a statement that you say back to the other person. And the intention is to mirror back either what they said using very close to their own words, or what we're assuming or guessing that they meant. So we're often taking a stab at some of that deeper meaning underneath what just the words were. This is one of the key ways that we demonstrate empathy, or our attempts to understand the other person's perspective and show that we respect their perspective and value them as individuals who come to these decisions with a whole host of life experiences and skills and opinions and thoughts, and all of that. We want to show that we really value that in them. So we demonstrate our empathy for that. We when you're choosing to make a reflection, it is important that we are a little bit mindful of what we choose to reflect, because what we reflect is what we're likely to hear more about from them further. And so that will then shape the direction of the conversation. So our instinct often is to ask a question after someone says something, either asking a question to hear more, or just giving them more information, responding or replying instead of reflecting. And so with the motivational interviewing approach, we encourage people to just try to reflect first, keeping in mind that you will always have an opportunity to respond or to reply. And you'll always have an opportunity to ask another question. But that timing is important. And so we want to work toward our first reaction coming out of the gate to be a reflection. And then we can move into some other activities as we go. We'll take a look at what that looks like in a minute. So there are, you can go to the next slide. There's a couple different sort of levels of reflective listening. The first level is what's called our simple reflections. And that's really where we're just giving back the other person's words. We're reflecting back some of what they actually said. We might be offering a slight paraphrase, but we're really not going very far beyond what the words that came out of their mouth exactly said. I call these sort of the parrot reflections, right? So if the person says, I don't think I'm going to want to get the booster shot, we would reflect back, you don't want to get the booster shot, or you're thinking you don't want the booster shot, right? That's just reflecting back exactly what they said. We're turning it around, making it into like a statement instead of a question, changing the pronouns, right? So they said I, we're going to turn it around and say you. And that's kind of the extent of it. So you can imagine, and this is what happens in my own head, is, you'd hear someone say, oh, I don't think I'm going to get the booster shot. Oh, you're not going to get the booster shot, right? It's the parrot. The parrot is just saying it back. And so the parrots only know the words that we teach them, so they don't stray very far from the actual vocabulary words that the other person used. There is definitely a place for simple reflections. They're especially nice when you don't know where you're going and you just want the person to say a little more about it. a simple reflection can definitely serve that purpose. When we really just want to demonstrate that we're listening closely to the person, and again encouraging them to say more, a simple reflection can work. Where we get tripped up a little bit is only using simple reflections, because that can get really circular really fast. And I think you can quickly imagine a scenario where someone might say, I don't think I'm going to get the booster shot. And you say, oh, you're not thinking of getting the booster shot. And they're like, yep, I'm not going to get the booster shot. You're not going to get the booster shot. Now we've got a frustrated person that we're talking to, instead of someone who we've sent the message, I'm listening and I want to really understand your perspective. So keeping in mind that our simple reflections have sort of a limited lifespan, but they're useful, and they're nice to have in your back pocket when you need to just sort of pause a beat, stay with them, and hear a little more. What you'll notice that I didn't do in any of the reflection, even the parrot, is I didn't add a whole lot of these introductory clauses, like what I think I hear you saying is, or sounds like, seems like, what you're saying is. I didn't add all that. And with motivational interviewing, we really encourage people to use those very, very sparingly, because what they're doing essentially is they call attention to the fact that you're utilizing a technique, as opposed to just keeping it feeling very conversational and engaged. There's sort of like a way of distancing ourselves from the other person. And really, what we want our reflections to be doing is connecting us closer to the other person. So just something to keep in mind that does sort of work a little differently in motivational learning than some of the other strategies that you might have learned about regarding active listening. You can hit next. So under the surface line, right, of our iceberg is where we really have a lot more going on. And these are what we call complex reflections. So we're doing a little more than just listening to the words and parroting them back. We're really working hard to make some educated guesses about their meaning. So we might try to reframe what they've said or reflect it back in a slightly different light. Often, one of the key ways to do that is by, if they're presenting something as a barrier, you might offer it back in the light of sort of a strength or a value of theirs, or something they can leverage to be useful moving forward. Another very common type of reflective listening is to reflect that unspoken emotion. And you can make some choices about what kind of feeling words you use. Something like unsure or frustrated or confused is not really a lot of depth of feeling. You don't have to say you're scared about this. You could say you're unsure about it. But it does get sort of at that deeper level where, they might not have said that they're feeling unsure, but you can tell from the things they've said and their nonverbal context. A double-sided reflection is where we point out sort of both sides of that ambivalence. So they might be saying, well, I know this would be good for me. Often they're connected with a but, but blah, 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 blah. And they're telling you, these are the two sides of my ambivalence. On one side, I'm feeling compelled to do something. On the other side, I'm feeling compelled not to, and I have reasons on both sides of that equation. And so a double-sided reflection just presents both of those back to the other person. Continuing the paragraph might be where we make a guess about what they would have said next. Like, what's the next sentence they would have said? Amplification is really just kind of turning up the volume on what they've said. So if they make a statement, you could reflect it back as sort of an absolute. So there never would be any reason that would make you feel comfortable to get the vaccine. And what we're doing is testing that out. I would use those very sparingly in the context of these types of conversations. They can be a little risky and a little sort of hard to navigate the response. And then a metaphor is a great way to get a more complex reflection. It, from sort of the brain science point of view, it engages our visual thinking part of our brain as well. So we're sort of getting more brain online in the conversation. Because we're painting a picture with our metaphors, using words, of course, but nobody's going to whip out a paintbrush, but we're verbally painting a picture, and that helps in just engage sort of a different way of thinking. So it brings another part into that conversation. And there are lots of other types of complex reflections as well. It's not important that you know all the types of complex reflections or even can identify which one you're doing. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a view of sort of the scope and the breadth of the different ways that you can add complexity to your reflection. So we're gonna take a little bit of time here. We got about 9 minutes left to just work through some scenarios of some common things that we've heard that you hear in response to conversations about the vaccine. So if you can go to the next slide, Jerry. And this next slide is something you might hear. COVID-19 cases are down in my community, so I'll wait until the next outbreak to get a booster. So before we do anything, I want to take a minute and invite you to write down or mentally write in your head, but if you have a piece of paper and a pen, just jot down for yourself, what would your response to this statement be? What would you say next? Okay, so if you can go to the next slide. So what I would suggest you do first in response to this statement is to reflect. And Kelsey's going to help me out a little bit because we want to show you what that might sound like. So Kelsey, if you can start with the statement.
Sure. So COVID-19 cases are down in my community, so I think I'm going to wait until the next outbreak to get my booster.
You feel like it's safe to wait?
I wouldn't necessarily say I think it feels safe to wait. I just don't think it's that urgent since the cases in our area are going down.
So it doesn't feel as urgent. And it also sounds like you do understand the value of being boosted when another outbreak comes.
Sure. And I don't think COVID is over, but after avoiding it this long, at some level, I would be sad to get COVID now. But since the cases are going down, that just seems really unlikely. So I guess for me, it's just a matter of timing, and I'll get the booster when I feel like I'm at.
Okay, so you see how, I'm going to pause here. You see how we were able to get more information from her just from this initial reflection of you feel like it's safe to wait. Then she said a little more about it. Did anyone have any, was that close to what you thought you would try next? Was this far from that? Any comments or thoughts based on, you're giving it a go and then this? This isn't the only one right answer. This is just one way that we wanted to show you that you could respond. So feel free to pop in the chat any thoughts, any reactions, any comparison to where you were. Okay, well, we'll keep going, but feel free to give us any of that commentary in the chat. If you can go to the next slide. So we felt like, it's good to show you a reflection, but then a lot of times the question is, then what? Right? So we left with Kelsey kind of saying, she feels like it is important. She does want to get boosted. It's just a matter of timing. And right now she doesn't feel like the timing is super urgent. So I would suggest that a next step, particularly when you're wanting to share some information, is to use another technique from motivational interviewing, which is explore, offer, explore. Sometimes this is also called ask, tell, ask. Or elicit, provide, elicit. They're all the same 3 steps. They just, I don't know why they're called 3 different things, depending on who you talk to. But what that really consists of is first exploring what somebody knows in that area, which is a really respectful and partnering way to share information. And then sharing the information if it feels like it's needed, and then inviting them to tell you, based on that information, what are their next steps. So Kelsey and I are going to play that out a little bit too. So Kelsey, are you able to repeat your last statement from the reflection one?
Yes. So my last statement was, I don't think COVID is over, but after avoiding it for this long, I would be mad to get COVID now. But since the cases are going down, it just really seems unlikely that that would happen. So I guess for me, it's just a matter of timing, and I'll get the booster when I feel like I'm at risk.
Yeah, it sounds like you've put a lot of thought into this, Kelsey. I'm curious about your understanding of how long it takes for somebody to build antibodies after they get each vaccination shot.
So when I got my first dose of the vaccine, I think the nurse told me it would be a few weeks until I was fully protected, but I'm actually not sure if that's the same for the boosters too.
Okay. If it's okay with you, I'd like to just share a little bit of information about what we know about sort of the timing and that timeline. We know that it does take time for you to build antibodies from each vaccination, like you said, generally at least a couple weeks. And we know, so that's why we recommend that people get the booster as soon as they're able to, because then they're better prepared for future outbreaks or infections. Like for comparison, we know that the Omicron variant, it became widespread in our community in just a matter of weeks. So that timeline sort of aligns with, if you waited until the rates were high, it may already be pretty widespread in your community.
Okay, so then the few weeks is still true for the booster like it is for that initial vaccine series.
That's our best understanding, yeah.
Okay, so then what I'm hearing is that by the time I feel like I'm at risk to get COVID, even if I got the vaccine that day, I would still have to wait the 2 weeks to be fully protected. And because the variants are spreading so fast, it can turn into an outbreak, and then I could get sick.
That's a possibility. And that's, that's the possibility, I guess, that we hope to help people avoid.
Okay, so I guess with all of that in mind, it doesn't really make sense to put it off. So I will look and see, for one of the clinics that's offering boosters and try to get it done in the next week or so.
Okay, that sounds great, Kelsey. So obviously, your every conversation will not go quite that easily and smoothly. But I think there are, some real benefits to thinking about how do we correct some of the misinformation and fill in some of the real knowledge gaps that are still out there, and do it in a partnering way. The benefit to this is what it tends not to do is evoke a whole lot of defensiveness. And that's what we want to avoid as we continue to have these conversations. We just want to avoid helping people sort of further dig their heels in about not doing it. We want to sort of shake a little bit of that loose. So there's another example in here, and I invite you to just take a look at that on your own and think about how would you respond. You can go to the next slide. And again, thinking about, a reflection being your first line of defense. And then if there is misinformation or information gaps, how could you utilize that explore model to work your way through it. So I appreciate everybody joining on today. I know we're at the end of time. My contact information is here. If you have more questions about motivational interviewing, you can feel free to reach out to anyone on the team that you have a connection with, or reach out to me. If this is something you feel like would be useful at future sessions, we would be glad to bring it in a more, now that we've gotten a little bit of this, we can play out more scenarios. We can do a little more interactive stuff if that works.
Thank you, Mia. And I know we are at time a little bit over. Kim, I just wanted to check if there was any pressing questions in chat. Otherwise, we can make sure that those chat questions get answered and we can send it out via email. Anything in chat that?
So there is one comment in chat from Angie about a brief explanation for the second booster, right? So the first dose, I think people were a little more accepting or interested in getting, but with the second one, really like, what else can we share, right? Be above and beyond what we did for the first booster and kind of the importance of that. And the one thing I will say is that, Angie, we are actively planning a session to talk about that second booster specifically. So we can certainly, touch on this during that session. But I think, to some of the points and the content that Mia shared today, a lot of that, I think could be used in conversation to try to explore that further and really understand, what the difference is or what they perceive the difference is between that first booster and the second.
With that, thank you for that explanation, Kelsey, in that chat question. And we'll wrap it up here for today. Sorry, we've gone a little bit over. Again, join us next week, 12 noon Central, 1 o'clock Eastern, and you'll be joined by Dr. Bobby Redwood, and we'll be talking to us about COVID-19 also, of course, and how that relates to vaccines and boosters. And then it will be our first time when we have the education session for the first half hour, and then we'll have that followed by the half hour of questions and answers. But thank you, everyone. Have a great day.